Hi, I'm Elizabeth McKinley Tuttle. I'm the class of 1993, and I work in the communications department here at Pembroke Hill. I would like to welcome you to the PHS Alumni Speaker Center. It's really great to have you join us for the inaugural program focusing on health and wellness. Tonight's program includes esteemed panelists from the Pembroke Hill community who will focus on techniques to deal with stress and anxiety, especially during the holidays and a global pandemic. The importance of sleep and its effect on mental and physical health, the use of humor to manage emotions, and techniques to keep our bodies healthy. We'll start by welcoming all of our panelists and giving them a chance to introduce themselves and briefly speak. Then we're going to dive into some topics via a round table discussion with our experts before answering some of your questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, please use the chat function and we'll get to your questions later in the program. If you're new to Zoom, there is a chat icon at the bottom of your screen. So if you click on it, then you can start typing away. Debbie Treglia is our Director of Alumni Relations and Special Events, and she will be checking the chat and will try to answer any questions you may have about this series and it's going to help ensure that I and the panelists see all your questions. So let's get to it. Our first panelist is Sonali Agarwal. She's a physician who specializes in pain management. She's also a PHS trustee and current parent. Sonali, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here. Good evening, everyone. I am an anesthesiologist and I specialize in interventional pain management. I work for the St. Luke's Health System here, and I see all kinds of patients from acute pain to chronic pain to cancer-related pain. The most common kind of pain that I focus on is spine-related pain, especially chronic low back pain and neck pain syndromes, which are the two most common kinds of pain that anyone goes to see their doctor for. So I work with specialized injection techniques in the spine for these different types of ailments, along with physical therapy and various other modalities to help patients through this. I also focus on the mental health aspect in terms of how that relates to adding to the person's pain that's manifesting physically. So like I said, I'm happy to be here. I have two boys here at Pembroke, 7th grade, Karev and Shrey in 2nd grade. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our second panelist is Jamie Copaken, who's also a member of the class of 1993, and he's a practicing psychotherapist. He's also a current PHS parent. Jamie, thank you for joining us tonight. Jamie, you have to unmute.
You would think after being on Zoom a couple times, we'd figure that out. Sorry about that. So thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the reminder to unmute. I'm a psychotherapist, so I work with kids, adults, couples, families. I grew up in Kansas City, went to Pembroke Hill, and moved away to New York and Philadelphia and Dallas, where I worked in a lot of different forums. So I was a counselor in a school, a few different schools actually, and addiction clinics and mental health clinics, and also in private practice. So I've had the benefit of seeing a lot of different kinds of settings, a lot of different kinds of issues, and kind of come back to Kansas City and put all that together in a private practice. So most people that come into my office have anxiety or depression. There's also a gamut of other kinds of issues as well. The couple things that I'd like to touch on tonight, and I know we're gonna get into a lot of great issues for all of you. I always like to attend these and come away with some tools, things that I can kind of walk out and say, okay, I understand that, that's easy enough to grasp onto and use now. So I'm gonna touch on some issues of cognitive behavioral therapy and humor, and kind of what are those in a nutshell, and how do you use them and implement them, and why? Humor is one of those tools that sort of gets forgotten, or it seems silly or frivolous, but it's really useful. It does a lot of great things for the body and the mind, and so we're gonna talk about that as well tonight.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Okay, also joining us tonight is Elizabeth Kensinger. She's the class of 1994. Elizabeth is a professor and chair of psychology at Boston College, and she specializes in sleep issues. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here and to have this opportunity to be zooming in from the Boston area to be talking with you all tonight. So as Elizabeth just said, I study links between sleep and our mental well-being, our cognitive function, abilities like our ability to remember events. I also more generally study the links between emotion and cognition and how things like stress affect our ability to function and have good cognitive ability in day-to-day life. So a lot of what we have transitioned to studying over the last 8 or 9 months is actually how the ongoing stresses of the pandemic are affecting people's sleep, are affecting people's stress levels. And kind of like what Jamie was saying, I hope to share some tips as to what we can actually do about this. I think it's not a surprise that we're all struggling with things like getting a good night's sleep in the current context, but I think there are some things that we can do to maybe make our night's sleep a little bit easier. So I'll be delighted to talk with you about that. I live in Boston with my husband and also have a 7-year-old daughter. So I'm also happy to connect as the challenges that this pandemic is bringing to parenthood as well.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'd also like to welcome Miriam Zavagnin to our panel. She is currently serving Pembroke Hill School as the mindfulness and wellness coach, and she's also a current parent. Thanks for joining us, Miriam.
Thank you, Elizabeth. My name is Miriam Zavagnin, and I am the mindfulness and wellness coach at Pembroke Hill this year. I'm also a parent to a 2nd grade daughter, and I started my education career back in 2001 as a Spanish teacher. And by the 5th year of teaching, right when I started burning out, as a lot of teachers do, I started practicing yoga a lot for myself, for my own stress and anxiety. And I started teaching my students, like just little things, little poses, little breathing exercises. And that year during parent-teacher conferences, the parents overwhelmingly kept thanking me for the breathing exercises that I was teaching their children, more so than the Spanish that I was teaching them. And that wasn't, I really don't think it was because I was a poor Spanish teacher. I think they really, they were really interested. One pivotal moment was when a couple that they were going through divorce, and they said that the child was sleeping better because of the tools that I was giving him. So that really kind of threw me into the world of like, what would that look like if we brought some of these contemplative practices into a school setting? So I did go on, I kept working in schools. I worked in administrative roles, but I kept exploring this whole yoga or mindfulness thing, and ended up going down the road of getting my yoga certification and also my certified mindfulness instructor certification through Mindful Schools, and have been teaching really since 2007, in school settings, in studio settings. And this is my 4th year implementing the Mindful Moments program at Pembroke Hill. We started off very organically with early childhood through 1st grade, and we've just continued to grow. And this is the 1st year that I get to work on both campuses, which is an interesting year to try and really penetrate any sort of a program. But we're doing it. The school is really, we're in different settings, different classrooms take it in different ways. And I always tell people, I wish I could teach mindfulness without ever saying the word mindfulness, because I do think there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is and what it isn't. And the word it's a hot word right now. So I'm excited to be here tonight and to talk about how mindfulness can help you through the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's great again to have all of you joining us tonight. It's great to have so many talented members of the Pembroke Hill community. Okay, so let's talk about some issues in our lives today. What we'll start is, as I mentioned, a roundtable discussion. I'll direct some discussion points to a panelist, and then all of you can weigh in on the discussion. So for those of you watching, we really want to encourage you to ask questions. Please use that chat function. And if your question isn't answered during the roundtable, we are reserving some time towards the end of the hour to answer as many questions as time allows. Okay, let's start. So many of us are working from home this year. Sonali, can you give some recommendations on keeping the body healthy and without pain? What do you recommend?
Well, as you mentioned, with the pandemic, a lot of people are working from home rather than going into an office. And those of us that even do go in are just in general spending a lot more time sitting than we ever used to. And how are we sitting? You know, are we just sitting in a recliner? Are we making a makeshift kitchen table desk? Are we putting our computer or iPad at eye level, or are we bending and stooping over and causing more issues with neck fatigue, chronic back pain or low back pain, headaches, eye strain? And I'm seeing more and more patients come into my clinic who are just complaining of back pain issues, neck pain issues, and they say no injury and haven't done anything, but you know, they're no longer in their ergonomic chairs. They don't have sitting, standing desks. And a lot of people are now getting those. They're getting them. You can get them from Amazon or other, you know, vendors, where they're changing their dynamics of how you work from home. So making sure that your computer is at eye level, so you're not bending over like this for hours after hours, you know, that you're sitting up straight and working on your posture. Because if you're sitting like that for 7-8 hours a day, day in and day out, you're going to have pain. And taking breaks, more frequent breaks, and stretching, and maybe even if it allows you to go outside and get a breath of fresh air, which is so important, and then coming back. But maintaining good posture is so critical right now in terms of preventing and or minimizing the pain in the back and in the spine in general.
Okay, I know I'm gonna like sit up straighter right now, so.
We all sit up, great, remind ourselves.
Okay, so there is really a lot to deal with now. We're in 2020 this year. Jamie, where do we really begin in figuring out how to cope with new stress and new anxiety and depression, and especially in this holiday season?
Yeah, I have several clients who say, you know, I've been preparing for this anxiety event my whole life, and now everybody knows what I feel, and you know, these kinds of things. And it's true, we're used to having routine, structure, predictability. There's so many things going on right now that are not that. So we kind of have a shaky foundation, and some people are better trained to deal with that. You know, they've lived through things, they've experienced things, and other people just haven't had those opportunities to practice those skills. So I think a lot of what I hear and what I tell people to do and what I've read about as well, all sort of centers on self-awareness, I'd say, is the main thing, to figure out, okay, what is it I'm feeling? What is it I'm thinking? What is it I need to do? What works and I should keep that, and what needs to change? And as you're changing, like any kind of a habit, you have to practice, right? If you want to, I don't know, shoot a whole bunch of baskets, you have to practice and get better. You have to have a good trainer. You have to have good support. You have to have good teammates, family, friends, people that are, you know, have your back and can help you through whatever the changes you're going through. So a couple thoughts come to mind is this cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of the basic therapy that that works really well. And that's, you know, what are you thinking and what are you doing, and what again works and is good for you, and what do you need to change? And part of that is thinking about what are you saying inside your head. So, and we all talk inside our heads. That's okay. That doesn't, you know, that's not a bad thing. But so saying, you know, if you're saying, oh, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to fail, this is terrible, this is awful, you're really kind of building yourself up, not in a good way, or bringing yourself down, let's say. So to challenge that is the term, you challenge your negative self-talk to try and kind of notice what you're thinking and feeling and saying, and do something different. That's sort of the basic main thrust of therapy. And then there's a lot of variations on that theme and a lot of other ways to do it. And the one that we'll, again, jump into a little bit more to is the humor piece. That humor can be a distraction, right? If you're tense, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, if you pop in a funny movie, nobody really pops in movies anymore, so, you know, use Netflix. And it just sort of alters your mood, it makes you feel better, it distracts you. And then there's also the humor that is perspective shifting. So it's not just funny, haha, but it really kind of makes you think differently or see things differently. And that's the really valuable humor, where if you're having a conversation with somebody and one of them uses humor, it kind of changes the way you think about them or yourself or a situation, and is funny and leads you to do something different.
That makes sense. Oh, thank you. Okay, so it's easy to be an autopilot right now, I think. Miriam, can you walk us through how much intentional mindfulness can make a difference in our approach to the day? Like, how can we avoid a feeling of repetition? And then what techniques do you have that could help us stay engaged throughout the week and throughout the day?
I'm going to fully disclose right now that I feel like I've been thrown back into like spring this week of, I have a child that's on quarantine, so back into virtual school here at home. And I feel like I almost feel fraudulent sitting here telling people what to do about this, because it's hard. It's so hard. And I really think that I'm really big into morning rituals. I really think that how you start your day is important. And so, whether that's coming up with a word or a phrase when you wake up in the morning, or something that you're grateful for, practicing some gratitude. I know it's not realistic to just all of a sudden jump into a meditation practice in the morning for everyone. If you can do it, that's great. And I know a lot of people that do that. And I try to do that every single morning. But even when Sonali was talking about the body and how much we're sitting, I also think throwing in some movement into your morning, even like before you get out of bed, maybe doing some breathing exercises. One of my favorite things to do is to really just like put my hand on my stomach and just feel like 3 big breaths before I get out of bed. Because it is like the Groundhog Day movie right now. I do wake up and you're like, oh, yep, still here, pandemic's still here. And so I think that getting some movement in, I have like a set little, my family knows that I have a set little thing that I have to do before I start my day. And it involves moving my shoulders and my hips into place for the day. I know that sounds really, I don't know what that sounds like to you. It may sound weird, but it's something that really sets me up for the day. And then of course, just because I do that doesn't mean I'm going to have a perfect day at all. So it's really those moments of resetting, of just knowing like, okay, what was my intention for the day? What's the word or the phrase that I'm going to use to get me out of autopilot? And it also just comes back to listening to that inner voice and like, how am I talking to myself? Really kind of taming that inner critic that we all have inside of our voice, I think is really important right now. I also think managing expectations is very important right now, knowing that maybe we're not going to be going full throttle professionally or personally. And just, again, like self-compassion can go so far right now of being really kind to ourselves. And I don't know, just the reminder that like a tense body, back to the movement piece, I just keep going back to what Sonali started off with pain management, is like when we feel tension in our body, we probably are feeling it in our mind also. So that means that we are, we're not going to be as open-minded. We're not going to be as curious. We're going to be kind of hard on ourselves whenever we feel tense. So I know I was feeling it right before the Zoom call was going on, and I actually didn't have the correct link. I could feel it in my body. And so it's like, okay, like, let's loosen this up. Everything's going to be okay. So that's my answer. I don't know if anybody else wants to jump in.
I was going to say, Miriam, yeah, I mean, tag teaming to what you're saying, also seeing a lot of us go through more isolation during the pandemic. That is also, adding to this anxiety, depression, and overall stress because of the family dynamics or work structure, and or just, being safe. And so the importance, I tell so many of my patients to, whether it's through a friend or a family member or another Zoom or a phone call, just to check up on each other, join a group, join somebody that you have that can be a go-to person, because as human beings, we need human interaction. And you're talking about Josie quarantining this week. And we know that, our kiddos, I mean, we are so blessed that Pembroke allows live school compared to most of the country. And they've been working so hard to make that happen. And when you must have noticed a difference that now she's not in live school and there's like a complete shift, and she's a kid, and the same thing happens to us adults. And we've been dealing with this since March, and The vaccine may be around the corner, but there's still no guarantee that life is going to go back to any normalcy for quite some time. And I think we still have to work hard at not self-isolating.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking it, I feel it so much more now because we have been so lucky all year being in person. And I know that last Tuesday when the whole school went virtual for a day, I know that some teachers said they felt PTSD, like when they heard that all of the doorbells going off on the Zoom, morning meeting that morning. And
Yeah.
so there is just this feeling of like, when is this going to end? And so really just focusing on the things that are good right now. And I say that knowing that, something like it's really hard. And so if you've lost somebody to COVID, like that's not gonna sound good to you right now. So
Yeah.
To piggyback on what you're both saying too, I love the idea of these are things that we're going to be talking about tonight to strive for, right? To sort of aim for. None of us are robots, none of us are perfect, and we shouldn't, have that level of hope that we're going to get it right all the time. We're going to be the best parent, the best job, the best worker, the best friend, all that kind of stuff. But to know what direction we're headed and kind of where we want to be, and like you said, be kind to ourselves when we can't do it that day. We can't, there are only so many hours in a day. There's only so many things we can do. But to kind of separate, okay, what do I have power and control over changing, and what don't I, and where can I put my effort? And there's all sorts of cliches and mantras and stuff that some are useful, so keep those, and the others throw out. But the one I always like is, worrying is like sitting in a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it doesn't get you anywhere. So those kinds of things, if you're like, okay, wait, what am I doing? Where am I? Oh, you know what? I've been worrying about this and thinking about this a lot. Is it helpful? Is it productive? Is there another way I should think about this thing? And if so, can I do that on my own, or do I need a friend or a colleague or somebody to kind of get me out of my rut to make some changes?
yeah. And that comes back to self-awareness, right, Jamie? Like knowing what you need during that time.
Yeah, and the ability to ask for it too, right? First, you have to know what you want. Then you have to feel, if I ask, will I be successful? And will I take this risk to ask, either of myself or of somebody else? And ask.
I think everyone has to understand that this is a vulnerable time for every single person. Doesn't matter what you do. You have kids in school, don't have kids, whatever the situation is, we're all vulnerable. And it's okay to feel that vulnerability, and be okay with that. That's huge.
Love this. Now I want to go back to the self-awareness in just a few minutes, but let me direct a question. We'll go around in a circle here. So Elizabeth, taking care of our bodies is very important, and there's a sleep component here. So how important is sleep here to our bodies? How much do we need? And then how does this help our bodies stay healthy, especially in the middle of, managing a lot?
Yeah. I mean, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to talk about sleep, because I think, we live in a society that really undervalues sleep. And I think especially right now, right, if parents are working from home and children are going to school from home, right, it's very easy for people to be working strange hours, sacrificing sleep, right? And again, it may be something that you have to do in the short term to get by. But I think we really need to appreciate what effects that might have. And I think it's really kind of, to my mind, a complement of what Miriam was saying about the importance of how you start your day, that, this is really about the importance of how you end your day. And so I would say many of the same things, it's about figuring out how much time can you take before you're going to try to close your eyes and get to sleep, again, to quiet your mind, to convert your bedroom back into a space for sleep, especially if during the day it's also been a home office or any number of other things that our bedrooms are often doing double time work as right now. The reality is that the average amount of sleep that someone needs is 8 hours a night, right? And again, that's an average. That means that half of the people need more sleep than that. And in this country and really around the world, most people are not getting close to that. Most people are shaving off at least 1, if not 2 hours a night from the sleep that they need. And that's not good for our bodies. It's not good for our immune function. It's not good for our physical health. It's also not good for our mental health, right? We increasingly understand that sleep is so incredibly important for our ability to regulate stress, both, physiological stress, but also the mental consequences of stress, for our ability to actually do a lot of what Jamie was talking about in terms of being able to reframe something, right? To use humor, right? To approach a situation creatively. Sleep helps us to do all of that. And when we're not sleeping enough, I'm sure we've all experienced it, right? We haven't gotten good sleep for a few nights and we're grumpy and we have a shorter temper with our kids and we can't figure out a way to solve this problem at work, right? And again, sleep isn't going to be the silver bullet that's going to magically help everything, but it can start to make things easier, right? It can make problems start to seem easier to solve. And so I really think it's just so important for us to keep in mind that importance. And again, in terms of the sorts of things that some weeks might be under our control, right? Maybe it is that we can just, turn off the computer, turn off the TV 30, 45 minutes earlier, settle our mind, and actually give ourselves that extra sleep that our bodies and our minds really need. And so again, I think thinking about how do we set up good sleep hygiene is the way we often use it. Just like you understand you have to brush your teeth and floss and have these routines to keep your teeth healthy, you have to establish these same types of routines, right? Trying to get to bed around the same time, trying to have things you're doing to quiet your mind, to make your bedroom seem like this place for you to sleep. So again, what you can that's under your control to make that happen.
I was going to add to Elizabeth's talking about, shutting down maybe 30, 40 minutes before going to sleep. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you want to segue into screen time, but, that's just what that made me think about is I'm sure all of you are dealing with kiddos on their iPads and computers, whether they're in person school or online school. The amount of time that they're spending in front of the computer is definitely increased, and it gets more progressively increased as they go into middle school and upper school. So they're fighting that, but even as adults, we are too. And so it becomes tough because we're not doing as much outside. So we use our devices for more entertainment. We can even watch Netflix on our phones. We can watch them on our iPads. We don't even have to go down to the main TV or this or that, and we can bring it into the bedroom and anywhere. And it becomes an addiction in some ways. We can't stop. And as adults, that happens. So certainly with kids, we see that, but we have to kind of mirror some of that for the kids and for our families, because I think many of us adults, we don't even think. I'm guilty of it. I think we're all guilty of it at times, where you just bring the phone in and it's just not an appropriate time, whether there's dinner or something. You just don't think anymore because our world has become so device friendly, if you will, and almost mandates it that we have to structurally stop and detach. And I think, and we all know about the light effect, of course, which prevents sleep. But these are real issues in terms of increasing anxiety and stress. Honestly, we're doing it to ourselves.
No, that's such an important point. And it also connects to the fact that we've lost so many cues to the circadian rhythms, of the day, right? We're not getting out and walking between buildings, right? There are so many things that were part of normal routines that exposed us to daylight when it was out and wasn't exposing us to as much blue light in our screens, right? Once the sun had set. And so I think absolutely anything that we can be doing to get some of that back, right? Even if it means working in, rooms that are getting natural light during the day, and then, putting your lights on dim once it's after dark, if you still need to be working during those hours, little things like that. You're absolutely right. But also so right that it's connected to this idea of not being able to shut off our minds, right? The phone or the iPad or the laptop is often sitting next to our bedside table. And so how do we go through that process of saying, even if it's next to me, it's not the thing that I'm thinking about right now, right? This is now my time to prioritize my body, my mental health, my sleep, right? And to say that everything else can wait until tomorrow.
Elizabeth, I'm curious about rituals that you recommend before sleep. I also have like my own little ritual that I do before sleep. I always put my legs up the bed or up the wall, and my husband's like, he just knows that's just, if I don't do that, like last night I didn't do it and I was restless. And so now I don't know if that's a mental thing or if there really is something to reversing the blood flow before I go to bed at night. But I'm curious about any rituals that you recommend.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm a really big fan of trying to have a 30-minute routine that's something that you can do all of the time. This actually used to be important to me when I traveled more, right? That no matter where it was, I listened to a song, I took my shower, it was sort of the same thing. And so even if it was a new space and there were elements there that were disrupted, it was still kind of giving my body these signals that now is the time for me to lay down and rest. I'm a big fan of keeping a gratitude journal right before bed so that the last thing on my mind is something very positive that happened during the day. So that's always part of my routine. I think in reality, different things are going to work for different people. For people whose bedrooms are doubling as things, I love routines right now that are incorporating ways to change the feel of the environment, right? Can you light a lavender candle 30 minutes before bed? And now that's a scent that you only associate with it being bedtime in your room, right? And you're not still going to be smelling that the next morning when now this is your office, right? Again, are there other, small things you can do, right? Is there, a picture or two that can be up on the nightstand for you to look at when it's bedtime, and then they go face down in the morning, right? So again, just these subtle cues, but that I think can be really important in helping that space transition. Because again, usually key advice is like, don't do anything in your bedroom other than sleep, right? You don't want to be having that also be your workspace. And again, especially these locations of stress, but that's just unavoidable for many of us in the current moment.
Elizabeth, I may be asking for a friend or myself, even with some sleep habits for my children and going through rituals with them. What about melatonin? Is that okay? Somebody might give her kids some sleep gummies every once in a while. Just saying.
Yeah, I think for short-term use, certainly when people were traveling more and, for jet lag sorts of purposes, again, I think to kind of get a sleep rhythm reestablished, if it's really been crazy for some period of time, I think it can be really helpful there. My view, and it's just my personal view, is that, I think if something like, melatonin is certainly on the milder side of things, but, something like that is continuing to be needed on a regular basis, I think it's worth looking into, is there something else that's going on, either, in terms of physical health or in terms of mental health, that might actually be getting in the way of someone getting a good night's sleep? Because again, there I just start to get worried that someone is using something as a crutch, but that's really kind of masking, an actual kind of injury or problem that needs to be solved. But again, for short term, I would have no problems with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great insights. Okay, so we touched on this a little bit earlier as talking of this concept of self-awareness, and it seems really important right now. And sometimes it seems like right now, the normal ways that we may blow off steam or socialize, work out, meet new people, et cetera, it's all kind of up in the air right now. So what techniques are there right now that we can help apply to ourselves to increase our own self-awareness, and then check in with yourself that we can model this for our kids? And kind of along this is a long question here, but what are some positive ways then that we can process like the grief and the difficult emotions that we're having right now?
Well, first thought I have is the idea of crisis breeds opportunity. So, we can't change that we're in COVID. Yes, we're working to get a vaccine, all of that, but this is where we are. So you get to reevaluate things. You get to say, okay, how is my sleep? What should change? How is my sleep routine? Friends, who do I want to spend time with? Who do I not? And then do you do it over Zoom or on the phone, or how do you do that? Exercise, right? We all know exercise is good for us and we should do more. But okay, so let's make a plan. How much exercise do I want to get? And I wish I took my own advice on this one, did more. But the point is, right, to say, I'm going to set a plan, I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to make a positive change in this way. Food, if we were talking about this earlier, that if there's food around, we eat it, right? So try and back that up and say, okay, what kind of food do I want to eat? And what kind of food should I have around? And what is my eating routine? And what should that look like? And even drinking, right? There's people who fall into too much of any of these kinds of things. So what is it you really want to see happen, and how do you set a plan to make it happen?
Yeah, I think I am seeing a lot more people who are using alcohol and food as a crutch, and to some degree, we're all guilty of that at different times, just because we are at home more, and it's It's just a good way to release stress. But, when you talk about awareness, is just being mindful or aware of, okay, how many drinks am I having, in any given day, or what food am I putting in? If I'm having 5 pieces of chocolate cake today, then tomorrow and the rest of the week, maybe I need to not continue that pattern. And so it is that self-awareness of realizing what are we doing? And I just cannot emphasize the importance of exercise. Whatever it is, I mean, the movement piece inside the house. Now we're going into winter. It's been beautiful the last couple of days. This weekend's going to get cold again. So it's not always possible for people to be outside, but some kind of physical activity in the home, be it yoga or be it just running or walking even in your home, with your AirPods on, and just whatever it is, but some kind of movement is so important.
Yeah, I heard the advice about exercise from a relative about pacing. If you, let's say, have an injury and you're not sure you should get out or go on a walk, or maybe you don't think you can make it out and back, then at least pace, and get some exercise that way. And if that feels better, then you add on to it and go a little further away as well.
Yeah, I also want to just mention, I think we said this before when we were speaking as a group before this, is just noticing, it's coming back to noticing how we're feeling when we're overeating or over drinking or not getting enough, just really paying attention to the emotions that are driving us there and labeling them, because sometimes that's the key. And then being really curious about like, oh, why do I feel like this? And really getting into feeling the emotion from the beginning to the end, because it will cycle through.
I love that word about curiosity as well. So we're starting to talk about modeling for kids too. This idea of saying, I wonder, or I'm curious about, or do you think maybe it's this? That works so well with kids, with adults as well, rather than just assuming, oh, I know everything about this spouse that I've been trapped with for 9 months and, in one room or something. To say, I wonder if maybe this person's feeling this way, and then finding a way to ask. And the active listening exercise is, the idea of, if I am upset let's say the other person's upset and I'm going to ask, I might guess, well, I wonder, are you frustrated because X, Y, and Z? And the other person would say, no, I'm not frustrated, I'm annoyed. Okay, annoyed is a little different than frustrated. Okay, do you want me to do this thing to solve it? And they might say, no, I want you to do, go away or talk to me or something. So to kind of go through that exercise of really saying, I think I hear you saying this, is that right? Goes a long way in the communication piece, and then being self-aware and then taking some sort of action as well.
Another thing is, I think sometimes we reach for food and alcohol or whatever else it is when we may need someone to talk to, or we may need something else. And it's just easier to go for that extra glass of wine or for that other thing in the fridge that we shouldn't have. When maybe what we do need to do is, like you said, talk to your partner or talk to a friend or a parent or your child or something a little bit more meaningful. And we're missing that, and we're not able to ask for it or understand that emotion because we're not aware and in tune with this. And again, I mean, if we are kind of being more in tune with what do I really need at this time, I think that's going to help us navigate that a little bit more appropriately.
It might also help to recognize too that, some of these things, many of these things are interconnected, right? Because I think it can feel really overwhelming if we're saying, yep, I'm drinking too much, I'm not sleeping enough, I'm not exercising enough, right? But to start to recognize that, well, sometimes just if you focus on improving one of those domains, right, it's actually going to have positive consequences in the other domains as well, right? If you start drinking less, that's actually going to improve your sleep quality, especially in the second half of the night, which may mean you have more energy the next day and it's easier to meet your exercise goals, et cetera, right? So I think for so many of these things, if it's feeling like you don't know where to start because there are so many things going on, right, just choosing something to prioritize and to try to fix can be a great way to get going.
Yeah.
Great, guys. So we kind of talked about screen time with kids, and we're getting into these cooler weathers, and this is specifically for kids, but I think it applies to people of all ages. But really, what do we do now with your kids? We can't now that it's getting cooler weather, and some of the activities that we typically would say go outside, play. We don't have those right now, and some of the sports. It just looks different. So what can we do now with our kids instead of just saying go outside and play or, screen time? What is there to do?
Oh, I'm going to go back to dance parties, movement, right? Like turning the music on, cranking it up, and just dancing as a family or by myself. Like, I just think I think there's a lot of healing in dance
And music.
and music. Yeah.
Does anyone play board games anymore? I mean, there's some amazing board games now. I mean, there's the old classics that we all grew up with, but there's even more. And I mean, I think there's some board games that can engage even different age levels, family style. And I think that's a great bonding opportunity as a family and for siblings or, whatever have you. But I think that's a great way to occupy some time and get them hooked or interested.
Yeah, we've absolutely gone old school back to board games, doing puzzles, just a lot of the things that I did growing up in the 80s, right? And it's been great because again, it forces all of us, and we try to have rules where, while we're playing the game, none of us have our phones by our side, right? And again, it's been as beneficial to my husband and me as it has been to our daughter, right? To just, again, have those moments that are about family and not about anything else going on.
There's also this idea of floor time, which is following your kids' lead. And it's usually talked about mostly with little kids, right? Like if they're building blocks, you build blocks with them. You don't teach them, oh, this is red, this is green. You just follow their lead. They're playing with cars. You don't teach them stuff. You're just following their lead. And so an example I'm thinking of, I have 3 boys at Pembroke. They're all totally different, which is fascinating to watch. The middle school and lower school. And among us is obviously this online game that everybody loves, or the kids today love. So our middle guy wanted to play that, and my wife and I were thinking like, no, we're getting off screens. We're not getting on screens. What he meant was to play it like live, like actually one person is an imposter that goes and hunts down, kills somebody, sort of. But so it turned into a game of tag, right? So that's sort of following their lead and playing an active game that we thought was, oh no, this is going to be an online thing. This is not what we're trying to do. So to come up with those kinds of ideas, or let your kids come up with those ideas, and they can be fun and active as well.
That's great. Those are really good tips. I know I'll be applying some of them and have been. We are puzzle people in my house. So thanks, guys. Okay, so holiday season, we're in it now. And typically, I think holidays are spending time with your family and friends, and I mean, even traveling. So this year is different. Like, what are some ways that we can stay engaged socially? I know you kind of talked about we need to, maybe it was Sonali or somebody talked about like not being socially isolated. So what are some ways to stay engaged and not becoming socially isolated?
I mean, I think, I know it's difficult to have these Zoom parties and they can't replace like a true live Christmas party. And I know everyone's Thanksgiving looked very different this year. And so it doesn't replace the same thing. So whether it's just a small core group of people or it's some old high school friends or college friends, or even in the neighborhood, getting together, doing some kind of a Zoom party or doing a online dance party, as Miriam was saying. I mean, some way where you feel like you're connected to other human beings that you care about and that they care about you in some meaningful way. Maybe sending them some small gifts through Amazon or, and doing some kind of a Secret Santa, online or something like that, just so you feel special. Nothing huge, but I think some ways to continue that engagement and feel like, hey, it is still Christmas or the holidays.
Yeah, I was just going to say back to the Zoom. I think I got kind of sick of like the Zoom happy hours pretty quickly. I'm a multivert. I really go between intro and extro. So I was pretty quick to dump the Zoom happy hours. But going into the holidays, I'm realizing we actually as a family just finally pulled the plug on our plans. We were kind of late we were in denial, and really pulled the plug, and that just happened today. And so we're just like, okay. And so we're all going to meet on Zoom, and we're going to have to try and make it fun, and maybe pull up some scavenger hunts, and like, just try to, instead of everybody just looking at the screen and being like, hey, say hi to grandma, like, make it some sort of a fun party. I mean, Elizabeth, look at our kids today. Like, they love getting together at lunchtime on Zoom just so they can like ask each other, what would you rather eat, this or that? Just so really, we're gonna have, this is just what we're working with right now. And if it's keeping us connected, it's keeping us connected.
Yeah, that is so true. And Elizabeth, you and I were talking a little bit about scheduling. Sometimes you can get busy and you forget to do things, but you were telling me about scheduling things. And would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was talking about how important it is that we all have things to look forward to, right? And I think that one of the things that's been so hard is that the things that we typically look forward to, so much of that has been taken away. And so I think sometimes it's about trying to find different things, maybe smaller things, right? But things that you can actually put in your schedule, that's something that you're going to be excited to do. And, again, in this context of socializing, part of what we've realized is that, it's kind of sad for us when we're Zooming with friends we would otherwise be able to go out to dinner with here in Boston. But it's actually been amazing when we've been able to Zoom with people that are all over the country that we would never otherwise have all gotten together, except maybe once every 10 years when a reunion or something brought us back together, right? But now we actually have this opportunity to have, this monthly dinner, right? And so I think if we can find things like that, where again, it's not the kind of poor substitute for what we would have otherwise wanted to do, but it's something different and novel that wouldn't have been possible. And so, we've really tried to approach the holidays in the same way, right? Both thinking about, okay, like hopefully this is our one holiday just as us, right? How do we make this something really special, right? And again, for us, part of that is, what does it mean for Santa to come to this house? What, right? There might be little things that you can actually make something really special to look forward to that you wouldn't otherwise have. But again, I'm also just a big fan of scheduling, again, just small things, even if it's signing up for some, online cooking class, just so that I know that there's something 2 weeks from now that I'm really excited to do. Sometimes it's literally scheduling, 2 hours where I am going to sit and read a book. And, my husband has agreed to take my daughter, right? That's going to be my time. But again, I think just having those little things where we say, like, whatever's happening today, it's okay, because tomorrow or the next day or whenever, right? There's something, again, that's under my control that I'm really excited about.
I also just wanted to add that I think, though, in terms of anxiety and pressure, in general, holidays puts a lot of pressure on most people in general, pre-COVID, post-COVID. So for some people, it brings a lot of anxiety for a variety of reasons. And I think with this year, with so much going on in everyone's life, it's okay to, again, be kind to yourself. So if not a whole lot is going on, I think we have to be very careful about not beating ourselves up and feeling badly that, oh, we're not providing all the decorations for the kids. Oh, I'm not baking the cookies all the time. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. I think it's okay to pause. I think it's okay to say it's different this year, to recognize that, to talk about that in your family, why it's different. And maybe that will give a little bit more peace rather than beating ourselves up again about what else we're not doing. That's right.
I kind of wonder about some of the simplicity that's come from this time, how much of it will stay.
Yeah.
I hope a lot. I hope a lot of it sticks. I think it is, especially the holidays. I hear so much about, oh, I've got to get all these decorations, like you mentioned up, or I've got to do all these things, versus saying, hold on, is the holiday really about all the decorations?
Right.
And if it is for that particular individual, great, like by all means, go do it. But is there something else, I think about this when we talk to people who have eating disorders or other kinds of things, and they're going out and they're like, well, we always celebrated by going to McDonald's or eating birthday cake. And it's like, is it really about the birthday cake, right? Is it really about McDonald's? Or is it really about, being gluttonous at Thanksgiving? Or is it about being with people? Is it celebrating? And so it's a chance to, again, get back to basics and figure out, what is it I really want to accomplish? What is it I really want to celebrate? And maybe it's not about the food, it's about time with people, or being thankful, or being, doing something special for somebody. It also reminds me of a client I had a long time ago that said she was talking to her mother on the phone an hour every single day. And her mom would basically, as an adult, and her mom would kind of berate her, and she felt terrible. And so we talked about, well, why are you talking to your mother an hour every single day if she's making you feel terrible? And that thought had never crossed her mind that she could possibly not keep doing that tradition, right? So we talked about, could she talk to her for half an hour? Could she talk to her every other day? Could she stop the conversation when it gets bad or mean? Could she hang up the phone? There's a whole lot of options once you sort of identify the problem. So this is a chance for us to say, okay, what are we trying to accomplish and what are we trying to do? Let's pick the right solution.
I love that. No, I was going to say, I feel like that's kind of redefining what our new normal was. And I was going to ask you guys about it, but I think you've kind of covered it here. Like the new normal, it could be family time, or figuring out spending this, how we're spending our time and what is valuable to us. So we have time for a few questions here, guys. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Miriam?
No, I was just coming back to the whole should thing that we've talked about before, of seeing if we can take the word should out of our vocabulary for the rest of 2020 and maybe forever. Just maybe things we do things because we think we should instead of for another reason. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Give us the expression, the should expression.
Come on, you say it, Jamie.
So we were talking about this once before, but the idea of don't should all over yourself, and you have to pronounce that very carefully. But if you're saying I should feel this way, or I shouldn't, or this shouldn't be happening, or something should be different, maybe, but okay, maybe not. Or what can you do about it to make that thing happen?
Love that. Okay, so I want to just get to a couple questions here that we have time for. One is talking about some of the stress associated with COVID guilt. Someone is exposed from you or a family member, or COVID shaming, feeling like you've been judged for your actions if you've caused a disruption due to illness. And I think it's really relevant today, and know several instances of this happening. So any thoughts on that?
I would just say that it is obviously rampant. It is still ongoing, and at least until we have vaccines, but just moving forward, doing the best job you can now. Whatever has happened in the past, we can't change that. Whether you expose someone or you have some guilt because of some activity you did, let's just be more mindful moving forward now. Learn from that experience so that that doesn't get repeated, hopefully, in the future. Be responsible with mask wearing and social distancing, and don't go in congregations or enclosed spaces with people, so be an ambassador, showcase that more to get over that, I would say.
I think Pembroke Hill did it. Oh, just real fast there. Pembroke Hill did a great thing at the very beginning of this year by sort of saying, we are talking to the kids about, how would you feel if you had COVID, or your friend had COVID, or a family member you knew? How would you feel? What could you say to them to make them feel better? And I thought that was such great positioning. Not, in effect, it was saying don't shame people, but it was also saying, how can you help people? How can you make this okay? So yes, we should all be doing everything we can to be safe, of course, but things happen even if we're being very safe. So it's not, I guess if somebody's really flouting things, then maybe they deserve a little bit of shame or guilt so that they change their behavior. But I think that a lot of times people are doing the right thing and COVID still is happening.
And this is a quick question for you, Miriam. What's a way to start an elementary yoga program?
In a school setting? Yeah.
I believe, I don't know, the question doesn't give that context, but I'm assuming so.
A school yoga program? Is that, or an elementary yoga program? That was the question.
Guidance to even look at this, or putting it, elementary, where's guidance you could find to help implement this type of program? This is for as an adult, where would you begin? Oh, wait.
Oh, for like a beginner yoga program for an adult. Is that the question? Got it. Okay. Okay. So I think for right now, since I'm guessing online would probably be the best thing. There's a new to me app that I promise I don't work for the company, but it's going to sound like I do in a minute because it's going to sound like a commercial. But there's an app called Down Dog, and it is amazing because when you go on there, you can pick the practice that you want, and you can say that you're a beginner, you have never practiced yoga in your entire life, and you can say I want to do a 15-minute practice. You can pick the voice, you can pick the music or no music. You can pick if you have pain in your shoulders or pain in your hips, or you want a little aerobic boost in your yoga practice today. You can add all of those things and it will give you a customized yoga class that you can do right then and there. You can also choose if you have a teacher that talks a lot or talks a little, a teacher that really emphasizes the breath practice or not. And so I think right now during pandemic time, that's a really great app to try out. Does anybody else have an idea? I know, Sonali, I know you practice yoga. I don't know if you have anything you want to.
No, I mean, I didn't know about the Down Dog. What a cool name, but I think that sounds awesome. Yeah, I would just encourage to add breath to any kind of yoga practice and breathing in general. If you did nothing at all, just breathe, breathe, breathe. I mean,
yoga,
as an anesthesiologist, I have to say that, but in general too.
Yoga without breathing is just like acrobats, basically.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think that's all we have time for tonight. I want to thank everyone for joining us for our first alumni speaker series. Our next one is tentatively scheduled for February, but more information about the topic is coming soon, and I guarantee you'll want to tune in for that. So I want to give an enormous thank you to our esteemed panelists for their time and expertise, and I think we can all agree there are some great techniques that we can start applying to our lives now. So also want to thank Debbie Treglia, our Director of Alumni Relations and Special Events. And if you have any questions about this event or any other alumni events, please feel free to reach out to her directly. So thank you again for joining us. And on behalf of the Pembroke Hill Alumni Speaker Series, I want to wish you the best for the rest of 2020. Thank you.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.